Well, hello and welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you're dialing in from around the globe. This is the 35th Insights Live panel discussion with Space Store. My name's Alex Harvey. I'm co-moderating today with my colleague Nick Baxter. We're just going to give it a minute or two just while everyone gets logged in, gets all their IT equipment functioning correctly. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes while everyone's joining. Good. Well, numbers are still climbing, but in the interest of time, I think we'll make a start. And again, welcome if you just joined us. This is the 35th Insights Live panel discussion with Space Store, and very excited to welcome you both if you're joining us on the Zoom platform, and also if you're joining us on Insights Live, where we're live streaming. Great to have you with us. Sorry we can't see you, but it's certainly great to have an online audience, and we're welcoming your viewpoints, your questions, your comments as we come through the discussion today, and certainly hope this is going to be a interactive and lively discussion with our panel. So my name's Alex Harvey. I'm VP of Sales here with Space Store, and I'm co-moderating this discussion with my colleague Nick Baxter. So we'll run through some introductions first, maybe just give a few thoughts around the topic for today, which is earning the commute through intentional design. What does that mean? How do we see that manifesting itself? And some ideas around how we've seen that developing and how we see that developing into the future. So first of all, let's talk through and introduce our panelists today. Very excited to have three industry experts and thought leaders with us. So perhaps we'll start off with yourself, Shazala. Perhaps you could introduce yourself, the organisation you work with, and some of your background.
Hi, everyone. My name is Giselle Bonilla. I'm the Director of Global Real Estate and Capital Projects at Zendesk. We are a US-based organization headquartered in San Francisco. We've got about 1,200 employees in the San Francisco Bay Area and 6,000 employees around the world. We've got 16 offices internationally, with a large concentration of people in Europe where this call is being based today.
Very good. Thanks, Giselle. Very excited to have you with us and looking forward to hearing your viewpoints and contributions. Perhaps we'll move to you, Brent, moving over to Texas.
Yeah, sure. I'm Brent Arnold. I work for Indeed, and I am based out of Austin, Texas. My team focuses on the innovative workplace and how we can always continue to improve it and make it better. Taking nothing what we have for granted right at this moment and always looking at how to continue to grow that. Prior to working at Indeed, I was an interior designer for multiple architecture firms, focusing on contract design. So it's been a great transition to be able to look at how to design for many, and then focusing on how the individual needs are for Indeed. For those that are not familiar with Indeed, Indeed is a global company. We have locations in America, EMEA, and APAC. With our headquarters being in America, but we do also have EMEA headquarters in Dublin.
Very good. Thanks, Brent. Thanks for joining us today. And finally, Elizabeth, introduce yourself.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Elizabeth Levine. I am a regional design director for Nelson. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have offices all over the country, and we do lots of different work types, but my particular focus has always been heavily on workplace design and corporate projects. So we are kind of seeing things from the point of view that you used to see, Brent, and now we focus on specific clients and what the changing needs are for the workplace landscape today.
Very good. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks for sharing your background. This can be an exciting conversation. Nick, perhaps you could introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. I'm Nick Baxter with SpaceStore. So I'm involved in the strategy and insights globally, as well as responsible for the UK business unit of SpaceStore. And hand over to you to do the same, Alex.
Sure. Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. So my name's Alex Harvey, VP of Sales at SpaceStore, and my role largely involves working with some of our clients globally, working with them to help understand their workplace strategy, the challenges and opportunities that they're looking to develop and work on, and then how SpaceStore can engage with those opportunities in view of creating successful outcomes through our clients' global workspaces. And very happy to be co-moderating this panel discussion today. So I guess we need to dive straight in and be really interested to get some viewpoints just before we open up to the audience. Perhaps if we look back again at the title, so earning the commute through intentional design was where we started with. It would be really interesting to kind of explore that whole topic. So first of all, perhaps maybe we could hear from each of our panel in your organizations, or maybe in your client organizations, in the viewpoint of Elizabeth. Is the office earning the commute? Are your colleagues, are your teams, are they in the office? What are you seeing from the data? And then I guess kind of as a secondary question, there's always a number that the data gives you. And is that number, is that benchmark, is that something that you've reviewed post-COVID? Is that something you're still looking at a pre-COVID benchmark? Be interested to hear from each of you what that looks like within your organization. Giselle, perhaps you could kick off.
Sure. So Zendesk is a digital first and remote first company, and our employees have the option to choose where they work and when they work. So for us, success is not deemed by office attendance throughout the week or the month. It's actually determined by productivity and the outcomes of the work that our employees are producing. So what we're seeing with this hybrid voluntary use of our spaces, our employees are coming in 3 days a week on average in general when they are, but we're still seeing, depending on the region in the office, employees coming in once or twice a month. So for that case, I would say, when I look back at our utilization rates in Europe, we're seeing some of the utilization hovering around 25 to 30% still. And we've got offices in Dublin, London, Copenhagen, Krakow, Poland, and so on. So utilization is still low, but we are seeing employees coming in intentionally to schedule monthly team on-sites. It could be quarterly business reviews, coming in at the beginning of the year to establish their OKRs for the year and so on. Fascinating.
And just a quick question on that. In your view, is that the workplace working? Is that what you intended your workplace design to achieve?
I think that's what we intended when we became a digital first and remote first organization, that the employees have the flexibility to say when they're going to come on site. And in many cases, we've got employees in large metropolitan cities that may come in voluntarily a few days a week because it's just so close to home. But in other cases, employees are going in intentionally because there are curated meetings or events taking place on site where managers want to get their teams together.
Great. I was hoping that would be your answer. So that's really good to hear and fascinating to hear about that. Elizabeth, could you share some insights from, as I say, from your own organization, but also you're working with clients as well. So I'd be interested to hear what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A lot of what we've been studying is that the desire to go in is really based more on connection than anything else. If we all have really learned how to collaborate remotely through our remote experience the last few years. And originally people were like, you have to get together to collaborate. That's really not so much the case. Like saying only 6% of collaboration is better in person. So I think the challenge is asynchronous collaboration. If you have several people in a room and several people who are not, that's a challenge because the people who are in the room are having sidebars and such. So I think some of those kind of almost more technology driven issues are things that'll be interesting to see how that gets addressed more. We have, even just in Atlanta, we have 2 locations, one heavily in Midtown, which is the more, urban market, and then one out in Alpharetta, which is more suburb based. And our folks in the suburb area actually tend to utilize the office a bit more. And I think it's also somewhat due to ease of parking. They don't have to pay for parking out there. It's quicker to get in and out. So we discussed some of this a little bit as a team the other day when we first met, that it's really very much based on location as well as not just the company culture. So it feels like, I think back to what Giselle was saying, it's more about people needing to be together for a specific kickoff or task. And it's more about those like cultural and connection issues more than anything else. So it's really hard to put like an overarching answer to it because it's so dependent on other factors.
That's interesting. And certainly what you said about the human to human connection being one of the things that people are really coming to the workplace for. We've seen that with many clients. I was having a conversation this morning with an interior designer, and that was very much the theme that she was seeing with a client we're working on. Is that something that's kind of curated across different teams, or is that something that each individual team is just kind of generating their own events, get-togethers, schedules for when people should be coming together for particular purposes?
Sure, for you, I've seen our clients do it different ways. Sometimes it's more team-based, but then they're also trying to create spaces to support activities that will drive people in more on a certain day. So we've actually seen some clients talking about more like larger, almost kitchen-like spaces, and they're going to host, a cooking class or like something as part of a special day so that people would have a reason to schedule meetings that day and then stay for something either social or, that's more corporate or meeting based.
Good, thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate the feedback on that. And just the message saying my audio is fluctuating, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, good. Cool. Come to you, Brent. Perhaps you could share some insights around what's working in Indeed.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going along with some of these topics, as we look at where maybe the office was a few years ago, as I'll call it an obligation. People are kind of expected to come into the office 3 years ago there. So without much thought in the morning, you got dressed, you got ready, you went into the office. It wasn't something you necessarily questioned. The last few years have really made people question what they're doing and intentionality of why they're going into the office. When we're seeing people come into the office, we're seeing it for a myriad of reasons still in there. A lot of the reason is around joining people together. There are groups that are formalized and saying, hey, we're going to have an on-site, we're going to meet as a team of various sizes and joining together. But we're also seeing these ad hoc communications happening too, that I need to work with a couple of my coworkers for the day and come out with a certain resolution on there. And so we're a lot of times seeing those sort of things happening. When it's going to be a virtual day of communication, no, we're not seeing as high number of people in the office. That's not necessarily what the office is supporting these days. But that's not saying it's not supporting that for everybody. Based on region, based on individual needs, based on your home life, based on various factors that are coming in there, people are still coming in to do some focus work in there. That's still an activity that is being supported and still a conducive activity there. Sometimes it might be better for people to focus and have that individual attention at home. Sometimes it might be better to have that individual focus at an office too, where you can really get that isolation and that quiet. Maybe the technology setup is better there. Everybody has a slightly different situation in there. I think, Alex, you also mentioned a little bit of kind of like that benchmark of what is what we consider a success in there. It's definitely changed on there. You can't look at it and go, okay, 40% of my office is occupied, 80% of my office is occupied. That's going to say, hey, that's successful or not. When we're looking at it, we're trying to evaluate exactly what the best way is right now for us to look at this. We know it's not occupancy. That's definitely not what it is. We're looking more at that experience that comes from that in-person connection of when you're with one another on there, but it is much harder to put a number to that exact fact there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I was thinking what you were saying earlier about people coming in for a myriad of reasons versus before you were just mindlessly going into the office just because it was there and because that was what you do. So almost whatever the data is, whatever the statistic is, the reason people are coming to the office, that proves that it's a success, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, do you have some thoughts you could share at this point?
I guess, like you, picking up what client organizations are saying and feeling, I think this human connection is the big one. That's in terms of a measure of success, Brent, I think that's quite hard because we like to make things numerate and scientific. And I was at a work tech in Switzerland just last week, and it was pointed out that the sensory experience, the effect of physical environment on us as people, is really, really important. But it's not numerate, and it's not something we have data around. That's probably where my most recent conversations have gone. If we look at success, what is that, and how can we catalog it or index it in terms of the experience? Because that's what people will move for, isn't it? They'll go in if it makes them feel really good. They came away saying that was a great day.
Yeah, it seems like you have to make the office work harder for you now. It's got to be memorable. It has to have better things than you have an opportunity to experience at home. I think it needs to be more flexible. Everybody's very accustomed to now like upfitting their own personal space to suit all their needs. So there's less of a appetite for like, you just get this desk and this is what it is. I think people have an expectation to be able to craft their own experience to support their work needs a little bit more highly than what we expected in the past. So.
The other thing I've seen with a few clients, just latch on to what you're saying there, Elizabeth, is the office needs to be memorable. I agree 100%, but it also needs to be almost more condensed. And so with some clients, they're actually physically reducing the space so that you get that. You get the chance of bumping into people because you're in a smaller space, but also you get the buzz of being in the workspace. There's nothing more depressing than being the only person in a huge empty office, or it feels like you're the only person. And I think condensing the space almost creates, a more emphasized experience. It increases the experience that you have.
Definitely more vibrant and exciting. I think we talked the other day, it likened it to going to a small wedding in a huge church and you feel very vulnerable and like empty versus you'd rather be crammed into a small space and feel energized. So it seems like that from the numbers, I mean, people could probably reduce a third of their space or thereabouts if it's this 2 to 3 days. But again, it's hard to know when people do come in, they try to come in together. So then, therein lies the challenge of figuring out what the right balance of space is and quantity.
We've actually done that over the past year. So we've consolidated a very large percentage of our office portfolio. I would say in the last 2 years, it's been about a 60% reduction in space. But what we have done is as we've consolidated numerous floors and facilities, we have taken some time to either reconfigure if we've got the budget to reconfigure and to reprogram those spaces, then that's great for us because we can provide a bit of a new experience for our employees when they come back in and, either delight or surprise people to know that things have been changed around in some spaces. But it does feel, I think, a lot better, as you were saying, Elizabeth, to have a bigger group in a smaller space. That is very well programmed and suits the needs of our employees.
Yeah, and similar on the front of what we're doing at Indeed, as we're looking, we're continuing to look at our floor plate and our usage of that to make sure that everything is just right sized, is how I look at it on there. That it's not going to be too large, not going to be too small. That you really have that proper density to really fill there. There's a little bit that we're still taking to look at the number of people that are coming in and how various policies can shift over time. That's one of the things that I think the last few years has really taught us, is to be a little bit more nimble, where we've been able to previously take a look and say, hey, this is kind of how we've been doing things. This is how we've been going on. This is going to work. This is our trends for the last 10 years. It's much more difficult to say that. So it's keeping a closer, constant evaluation of what success is in an office space, both numerically, looking at utilization as one factor of it, but also looking at what activities are happening in the workplace. And Alex, I think you also mentioned to kind of the point of what is that success of the workplace in there. If I was to define it, it's you're able to do the activities that you need to do and do them well. And there could be a connection there on what brings employees the most happiness in there. I think probably all of us as an industry has probably survey fatigued our employees to death, just trying to really make sure that we're truly understanding things. It still does bring importance in there because we do see continued trends and changes of what people are expecting and what they're wanting. Kind of going back a little bit to the focus work conversation there for a moment. It's interesting. We're asking employees what they see as work success, what they need for work success. And most people said that they need to have a dedicated space for that work success in there. Though when we ask why people come to the office, it's for that social connection. So it's a little bit of a disconnect on what that is. But overall, if we're able to look at that and go, hey, when they're coming into a space, they're able to have what they need to do those activities. It's a successful space there. And how they're also able to connect to others, since that's a lot of what we're doing is trying to build that connection. If you are coming to the office, do you feel more connected to your team? Do you feel more connected to others around you? So we're taking close observation on that on a continual basis to see if there's trends that continue to shift over time.
And I think it's interesting that everybody, the connect is the big drive, but yet if you go in for a day, you're not going to connect the entire day. But if you're there, you probably will spend more of your day because you've already committed to the commute and gone. But we're tending to start to create experiential neighborhoods, so to speak, where you can kind of gather and know that you can find your team, but you can do different types. I mean, it's back to the kind of older, models that we used to do of activity-based design, but it's almost just more like you go in and you have an area that you can separate out and have an individual focus room for your calls that day and not be in an open environment the entire time and distracted. And we're so much less like amenable to that now that we have gotten away from people sitting in a workstation and somebody's talking right next to you while you're on a call. Like, we just don't put up with that anymore. We would rather do that call at home. So I think it's just a little different. Whereas before, maybe you moved around the entire space. Maybe now you come in with your team and those things are kind of more grouped together in different areas. So you're not, you're getting the connection, but you also can choose your space type based on your activity. But it is so much harder to measure than it used to be with seat sensors and things of that nature. It's just a different landscape.
And do you think, Elizabeth, the work settings available match the needs and expectations? So there's some social, getting the buzz and the collaborative or collegiate feeling, but also some focus work. Do you? I think
for tailoring, some things are on the market, and then others, I think we're tailoring them to suit our new needs. So we rarely do. I mean, it's again very client based, but we rarely do a dedicated private office anymore. Like, we do a private office-esque setting that can be used as a meeting room. So if someone's in for the day and is of a need for that, they could reserve it and use it as an office, but we don't load it up with a lot of personal bookshelves and things that we used to do for people to really like settle in, because most folks aren't, if they were given the choice, they'd rather have the flexibility and come in and reserve one, versus now some of our lawyers, law projects, that's a little different story. They still need dedicated. That's a cultural expectation. But I feel like from a tech side, which is more what, Brent and Giselle and I are kind of representing, that's not the way of the future for most of us. So
I think for us at Zendesk,
offices anymore.
Yeah, for us at Zendesk, I think, Nick, you asked a question like, are our spaces designed well for the purposes that we require? I would say yes. And those are spaces that were even designed just pre-pandemic that were very, very progressively designed. I would say, yes, they are. However, there are spaces that we have had to consolidate where we have not yet gone in and removed pockets of focus space and workstations that we really would like to do. So if money were no object in this particular case, we would remove a large percentage of workstations and convert those spaces for collaboration or open space. In lieu of just having, large concentrations of workstations. We're finding they're actually being used because employees are still coming in. They might have, agenda of on-site meetings, but they're still coming in and leaving their bags at desks as we did previously, but then pivoting to go in and out of workrooms and conference rooms. And so it's still a good place to have focus space, but not required as a everyday use in our offices.
Yeah, very interesting. And do you think there's any heightened expectation of private space or quiet space after our 2.5 years of working at home?
I think employees still, we find employees still like quiet spaces. Like we did program quite a few quiet spaces with either draperies and curtains where you could be in a small lounge and have heads down space in a non-traditional setting. People still do appreciate the libraries that we designed pre-pandemic, so they are being used. And sometimes you might come out of a half a day of meetings and need to just sit and focus on a number of emails that need to be resolved, in that same day. So it's still needed.
Yeah, and we're completely seeing that people still need that isolation space to be able to work. And kind of to Elizabeth's point there, we don't have any private offices, and we've never had any private offices as a tech company. But what we are seeing is people utilizing conference rooms, no matter their size, for that individual one-off space. So I mean, that's definitely showing us that we don't have enough spaces to be able to support that individual quiet focus work when people are going in and utilizing them for a 12-person conference room. For single focus on there. So people are still wanting to get that quiet place to go away from. I think part of the challenge is all of us, and Giselle, to your point, if there was unlimited money there, like we would want to tear out everything, do everything different. That might not actually support what we want to do then in a year there. So being able to look at that flexibility is an extremely important thing too. It would be nice to, again, just say we're redesigning everything to be flexible. That's not the case, for I think everybody right now. But how we can continue to monitor and look at what needs to be done. And so as we're looking at building out spaces, one of the spaces that we're building out right now as a new office is in downtown Austin. And this space was originally designed prior to the pandemic. It's a large space, so it took a little bit of time on the design of it. 3 years ago, at the start of the pandemic, we decided to kind of just pause for a moment and go, what is what we're doing actually working? So as we redesigned and redeveloped it, the idea was to be able to build this space much more flexible, going back to some things that maybe have gone out of favor a little bit, such as demountable partitions. So we're able to look at, are our room sizes going to continue to fit the needs of today and tomorrow? And then a huge focus on FF&E to look at how is that furniture supporting that flexibility? If we wanted to remove workstations, if we wanted to have more modular phone spaces, if we needed more collaboration spaces, how can we quickly change it from one to another? The other thing that we're also looking at with that flexibility is not only flexibility as a large space altogether, but also from a teaming neighborhood perspective on there of what do those individual teams need in the space, knowing that there's not a necessarily one size fits all approach. So some teams may be on phone calls all day, some teams may be collaborating all day. So really making sure that when they're in the space that they're working in, that they're able to do that best work.
Yeah, we had a very large project here in Atlanta that we had built out an entire tower of Workspace. It was all free address, it was tech. So, you know, it was free address supported by meeting spaces, but they were planning to do a whole additional building worth of more traditional workspace. And that, then of course the pandemic hit and they were like, well, wait a minute, actually, let's just keep the workspace we already have, but what we built out in the new adjacent space was more interactive and support space and a lot of partitions that could flex and move and open to create larger or smaller zones. And there were some other amenities as well that were important to employees, fitness centers, some like large meeting space experiences for like quarterly meetings or things that they had to rent space prior. But other people in the building can rent that out. So it's just interesting. You still need space, but it's maybe not the same space you needed before. So, and that individual like workstation quantity has like diminished. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, Elizabeth. And yeah, we've certainly seen that trending direction happening with a lot of clients. The space for individual work is often somewhere off-site, whether that's home, a co-working space that's not down in the city. You don't have to get the same commute to. I wanted to just throw in a question we've had in from the audience, just kind of latching onto your point about the amenities, and be interested to hear thoughts on this one. The question is, what's the most attractive amenity or feature of the office that's most effectively drawing people back in currently? So we've heard a lot of talk about magnetic offices that make workers want to be there without mandates. So what are or have you seen any effective magnets that are really drawing teams and colleagues to be in the office rather than elsewhere?
I'm going to say 100% with our population. Food is one of the big magnets on there. I think what's interesting about food is obviously that's a necessity in life that you have to have. People enjoy having that amenity provided to them. But what food also can do, we serve lunch during a 2-hour period. We now see with being able to serve lunch in that 2-hour period in a certain space, it's also bringing people together. So it's also serving that purpose where if people are bringing in lunches, there's that habit of wanting to eat at your desk. And then you just kind of go along that trend. So yeah, the food definitely is one of the things bringing people in when we talk about from a pure amenity space on there. But being able to have these large social spaces, Elizabeth, as you're mentioning there too, and being able to have groups come in is also what is driving a large number of people into the space at one time as well.
Yeah,
very interesting. Giselle, you mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm also a big believer in having hospitality services on site so that, you know, we can support meetings and events and also really so people feel welcomed in our and at home in our spaces. You know, I've heard it from so many people that if the food is not the same or better in the office as it is at home the last few years, then what's the incentive to go in? And I think, look, the incentive is to go in and see people that we haven't seen in a long time and to interact with our peers again and actually collaborate in person. But, you know, having those amenities on site, I think is going to keep the audience in the office. And so one thing that we recently in the last year or so, we lost our event space in San Francisco just through consolidation. And so we are now seeing in the last probably 3 or 4 months, our new CEO wanting to have in-person town hall meetings. And so because we don't have that space in the office, they're going off site. And I find it just to be a shame that we're losing the audience to an outside venue where we can't capture that audience audience and that connectivity and collaboration when that meeting has completed, unless there is a secondary event that's taking place that will retain that audience. So I think capturing those employees and that audience in the office is critical to continuing the collaboration that we want to see, that productivity in our spaces.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like even we have some office projects that are more government focused, and even just being able to use lobby spaces and grand stair amenities to, like, you know, have a landing on the stairs. So if there's a big presence, you know, big announcement, somebody can utilize that and announce, and you can have a large gathering in a space that is suitable for having a lot of people, but you're not dedicating and paying for space like that, you know, every day. So it even kind of ties into maybe where you choose to locate an office, or if you don't buy the lobby, so to speak, you know, you pay a percentage to be in that building, but maybe I think there's more creative things now that you're not a full building tenant, or if you build that space out, you have the ability to rent it out, you know, to other people in the building. So yeah, you don't want to bring everybody somewhere else and then tell them to go back to the office, because they won't. They'll go home, you know.
Yeah, I would say building amenities is probably a secondary, right? It's if you know, the employees are asking what amenities do we have in our facilities, but as they think of commuting into the office, depending on the city, we have a number of buildings that have end of trip facilities. You know, that's what they're referred to in Europe and Asia, but having, you know, bike storage and locker rooms and showers, and even if a building has a gym, that is a huge incentive to employees to come in just to go about their day-to-day routine.
Really interesting, Giselle. And you mentioned earlier the phrase used was the delight and surprise the team. Do you kind of, are there any kind of surprises you bring on from time to time? Does the amenities you have, do they sustain that continued drawing into the office?
This year, the company rolled out in January, or they just made the announcement actually a few weeks ago, that they're bringing out a kind of a connection budget for employees. So there's a quarterly stipend that we're given that allows us to connect with our employees in person. And so that money can go a long way. It can go to just meeting with a peer in person over coffee, you know, having lunch, maybe bringing in, you know, food into the office, but allowing us to connect with our peers in person. And it's really a hospitality-based amenity. So it's at our discretion to use, and we're seeing employees are engaging and, you know, meeting with people on site to have that coffee chat. Taking it from the virtual coffee that we've done years ago to now in person is great.
Bravo, that's brilliant. I love that.
And so is the feeling that one of the biggest draws back to the office is actually our colleagues, because that face-to-face quality human interaction time is the piece that we cannot replace any other way. Just to throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I completely think so on that. I mean, what we're seeing from employees, what we're seeing also from leadership is that there's not a way to build that virtually on there, that just even having that, whether it's a global team and you have that once a year connection or just that very minimal time, there's so much that you can build from just trust with each other, build with empathy from each other, of just having that little bit of time of that in-person connection there. You feel more comfortable talking to somebody also there. The thing that's kind of shifted in our more digital world is you just have to be so intentional about every single thing that happens. I have to send a message to somebody if I want to ask a question, and it gives you that moment to think of, should I really be bothering them right now? Do I really want to go through that? Where when you're seeing those people in person, you build that connection of going, okay, no, it does not seem like I'm going to be bothering them if I'm asking that question. So you can continue to spawn off that throughout the rest of your work.
I totally agree, because we connect even nationally with other design leadership across the firm who we don't work in the same locations. We really don't necessarily work on projects together, but we do similar things. And when we connect, you know, yearly or half a year, it's like seeing old friends, and you feel much more inclined to reach out and say, hey, I'm working on this. Have you done something similar? Can you give me some advice? Or, you just have a different feeling of approachability with people once you've met them in person. You can't do, even if you've met a million times on Zoom, when we met in person, it was completely different. So
100%.
we want to create offices that will allow that for, our local teams. So, I mean, some folks have been hired during the pandemic at our firm or at other companies, and until you have a need to get together, you haven't met, physically. So we need to support that.
I was wondering that, Elizabeth. Sorry, just to draw in a question that's coming from Laurel. So kind of related to what you were saying there, how do we engage the new hires who don't have those established relationships? We're really interested to know what kind of strategies or structures you have in place to specifically facilitate that, where we have new hires who don't have that network of relationships that somebody who's been with the firm longer would have had pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You ask such a difficult question there, Alex. So I think one of the things that has been done, and we've all seen this, again, the intentionality. So I have quite a few conversations on a weekly basis with just no necessarily agenda set up, but just a way to be able to build those conversations in there, whether it's just a 15-minute conversation of just going, hey, how are you doing? How's life? Since we're not able to build that as much on that sporadic moment. So being able to just build that and looking at that as kind of just a normal part of culture really helps, I find, in this hybrid, remote-ish world.
Yeah, and I think finding an opportunity to connect with each other. Oh, if you need to go in, let me know, because then I'll make an effort that day because I'd like to see you, and particularly the younger staff, they need that. You do absorb by just overhearing and seeing what others are doing. So there's a lack of that with less active participation in the office on a daily basis. So.
And I find that's something which you continue to see the benefit from. I've been with Space till 25 years now, and I still find being in and around our teams, you learn something just from overhearing the conversation between a project manager and a designer. This isn't just new hires that recognize the benefit of that.
Mm-hmm. I guess we just have to feed everybody every day. I mean, food is a driver for both of your firm. Like if there's a lunch and learn and somebody's going to be in an office one day that week, they will go on the lunch and learn day then, because they'll get to see people and have free lunch and connect. So sounds silly, but I think that's a bigger driver, I think, than some of the other amenities. So I love your stipend, Giselle. That's awesome.
Say again, Elizabeth.
I love that you all have a stipend now to encourage activities, or it'll just make it more intentional to arrange something and bring people together.
Yeah, and we were holding back on business travel up until this year, just to make sure that it's safe for people to travel, and also reevaluating just corporate travel budgets and so on. But this year we rolled out corporate travel and have, all departments have budget to be able to fly employees into specific locations to meet in person, because we hired probably over 2,000 people during the pandemic around the world. So I did learn from our legal department, actually, I think it was last month, they had about 25 or 30 people from the legal department fly into San Francisco for a quarterly meeting. And the result of that was they actually were able to determine their OKRs for the 2023 year by having that meeting in person, where they said, that would have taken several days to all agree on OKRs virtually over Zoom calls. They were able to just get together and have an open dialogue around what are the goals and objectives that they want to complete this year, and get that decided within a meeting. And of course, there was all kinds of other positive reasons and results of them getting together, but there are people that had never met in person in the last 2.5 years that were able to finally meet their peers. So.
Excellent. So they arrived at an outcome probably quicker than they would have done, and maybe arguably a better outcome as well than they would have done in a kind of asynchronous virtual way. Sorry, Nick.
No, I was just thinking too, are we also seeing is there any evidence or any experience of a snowball effect as people come in more, they meet more people. Actually, it was a very nice change from the home office, which has been the one place for so long. Is that going on at all, do we find?
I think there's a little bit of
the
fear
snowball
of missing
effect.
out. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, I'm just, so it's a snowball effect. Yeah. I agree with you. It's the fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing with meetings when they're partially in person. I think then people are like, oh, I wish I was there because I'm missing out on all that additional chat that goes on as part of it.
Yeah, like if I would have known, I would have come down and said hi to everybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a question too, just about how culture plays into it, and it absolutely does. I mean, what's right for one firm and company and culture is maybe not right for another. So I don't, again, it's never a one size fits all solution, but I think some of these overarching topics are consistent, like needing feedback, needing choice, all of those kinds of things. So.
I think that's that question that was posted, that's got to be a yes, hasn't it? Culture.
Absolutely.
The experience you go away with, certainly as much, probably much more than the amenities.
Yeah.
As a driver and as a magnet for using the workspace. To me, what's really interesting, I suppose, is the being involved in longer term new product concept and making sure we're equipping the clients, organizations, big employers with the right settings. Is what's coming out is that many more spaces for individuals are needed than pre-COVID, because there's this need to get away again and work quietly, even on the office day.
I think what Brent alluded to earlier too, just that what's right today might not be right in 6 months or a year. So having the flexibility to divide spaces with furnishings and maybe not with a hard wall or millwork like we used to gives you more flexibility. You still need a certain amount of acoustic privacy, but flexibility is more important than ever, I think, in terms of as you see how people are using space, being able to adjust it accordingly.
If I could just share an image, this is just in terms of research really and feedback, but are any of you using, no, I can't, I'll do it another time. Any of you using semi-divided spaces which are open to the buzz and the chat in the office, but there's an alcove or a nook, not a booth with a door, so that you've got that quiet space to work, but you're not losing the buzz of being in the office and the surrounding sound?
We're experimenting right now with different types of, I'll say, privacy in a space and what's necessarily proper for that amount of work in there. So we're testing out spaces that are similar to that one that you were showing in there, where you have some privacy, but you're still able to see what's around you.
And
but
here.
also,
See and
yeah,
here.
we're also taking a closer look if what privacy is needed. It starts going into that individual need in there. An open space like this is going to be great for a lot of people. It's not going to necessarily be great to all population. Some will need that closure in the space, which is really just something that we've had to take a look at, of just having that hyper focus on making sure we're really creating spaces that support the diversity that actually works in an office space.
Yeah.
It's really funny you pulled this picture up because we've used this on some of our visioning boards. And we have some clients who are like, this is amazing, this is great. We need some destinations like this. We've created some spaces like this that ends of corridors. So there's even a little bit extra layer of, you know, not being out in the middle of the workspace. And then other clients are like, oh, I don't like this. This doesn't work for me. So again, I think it's so tied into your culture and what's acceptable. But it's also about giving a variety. So if this doesn't work for one team or one employee, they can go to a smaller room with a door if they need to.
Yeah, variety, multiplicity of work settings, types seems so key.
But I love that that's furniture, because if it's not working, you can put it in an enclosed room and you haven't built something that now you have to pay to tear it down and, you know, start over. So. Seems like a better.
I know we're kind of coming up to time. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes to go till the hour. So been a great conversation, some good questions coming in from the audience as well, and really appreciate all of the thoughts and insights from our panel. I had a quick question, actually, was just thinking earlier around what might be the barriers that would prevent somebody from coming into the office, and be interested if anyone's taken any strategies to try and understand what those barriers might be, and then perhaps what can be done to remove those or reduce those barriers.
I think some of those barriers could just be personal. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think some of those barriers just could be personal. If somebody's got childcare obligations at home, if they're taking care of a family member, a loved one, or even a senior, they've got to stay home. And in some cases, there's no workaround for that. I also think that if somebody's in that situation, they are or should be having conversations with their manager and their peers so that they understand what their unique situation is, and they're not judged for not coming into the office on a regular basis, because we certainly wouldn't want to discriminate somebody who's got family needs at home that prevent them from coming in.
And I was starting to say, I think ease of access for coming in is a little more important than it used to be. For example, parking, like living in a big metro area, we used to buy parking by the month and we got a discount. But now most of us don't do that because we're not going in as frequently. So when you go in, you do have to kind of evaluate, okay, it's going to take me longer. I have to pay for parking. And that's a big deal for everybody, really, from a budgetary standpoint. So I think being able to park easily and get into and out of a space is more important than it used to be. Whereas before you used to just go in and commit for the whole day. Now people come in for a meeting or an afternoon, or so small details about convenience and access, I think, are as important as having a great space to come to. So.
Yeah, there's now that hyper focus on every single element in a space, and ease of access and parking is one of those elements in there. If you come into a space and you go, oh, it took me 10 minutes to find a parking space, you're going to think twice about going in that next day. But even what's going into the office space in there, if your main objective was to sit at a desk and focus, if that was your objective for that day and everybody was being loud around you and you could not get that done, you would then again think that second time and go, okay, maybe I'm not coming in the next day. So it's providing those diversified experiences, but also that hyper personalization and focus on what is needed for that individual is what we're seeing.
Interesting what you're saying there, Brent. Just reminds me of one client we worked with. They're actually an engineering firm, so they were kind of showcasing their own talents, but they have a live dashboard map of the office, which is giving you real-time data around air quality, around the noise levels in different areas of the office. So if you've got that situation where you're looking for a quiet place to work, you can actually see in real time that over that corner is noisy and over that corner is quiet, which I thought was quite a cool way of kind of subtly uncovering the barriers and then steering people's behaviours towards the right space for the right task.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Very cool. Well, as I say, we're kind of reaching time now, so be glad of any final thoughts, anything that perhaps we've missed, or anything that you've found beneficial and learned from today's conversation. Elizabeth, perhaps you could kick off with any final thoughts you had.
It's been fun to get together and hear from different points of view and different locations that we're all kind of dealing with similar issues. And I feel like some of the things we talked about when we had our first kind of meet and greet was how we're measuring things. It feels like we haven't been in it long enough to know. So I think that there's a lot to still be learned and uncovered together. So I think we're all looking at things through a similar lens, and it'll be interesting to see what the future holds.
Yeah, that's true. I think, yes, we're in a time where flexibility is key. So what works today might not work next month or next year. And, having flexibility with your operations is going to be critical, at least in the future, in the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see as a big takeaway is we need to look at continuous measurements of spaces, where we've been looking at things as being consistent in the past. Of we need to be able to continue to measure and continue to look at and continue to respond to what is needed for this specific period. The new normal is always going to be the new normal. I'd like to take that term away from vocabulary, but it's always going to be continually evolving on what that office space is.
Excellent. Yeah, really appreciate that. Nick, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, I think those are excellent wrap-up points. Just to pull them out again. So variety of spaces, we're still early days and measuring what's going on because it's still early days. And I think we know more than ever that we don't know what's ahead. So flexibility, building in flexibility, investing in the space to make it more attractive, but somehow in a flexible way. Those seem to be the key call outs for me. And thanks very much to all our panelists for today.
Yeah, just to echo that, Nick, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Giselle. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Brent, for joining us. It's been a great conversation, and thank you to all the audience as well for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.